In early 1995, a hiker mysteriously disappears in the remote mountains of central Oregon, igniting speculation about a potential animal-borne virus connected to the region's wildlife. As more unusual sightings occur, the local community begins referring to the illness as Hill's fever, also known more ominously as the face of the wolf. The scene shifts to a father and son on a hunting trip in the same remote area. Young Blake Lovell is both excited and uneasy around his stern father, Grady, who struggles to control his temper. Suddenly, the quiet is broken by the sharp snap of a twig. Blake peers through his scope and spots a mysterious humanoid figure lurking in the dense forest. Overcome with fear, they flee to an elevated hunting blind for safety. As heavy footsteps draw closer, Grady grips his rifle, ready to defend his son. But after a tense standoff, the unseen creature growls and retreats without attacking. Later, as Grady surveys the area, he discovers the mutilated remains of a deer. Just then, he catches sight of the same eerie figure and, acting on instinct, fires a shot, but misses. 30 years later, Blake lives in San Francisco with his daughter, Ginger, and his workaholic wife, Charlotte. Much like his now estranged father, Blake struggles with his temper, often reacting to situations with aggression. Currently between jobs, he feels the strain on his marriage, while Charlotte, a dedicated journalist at a prestigious firm, grows increasingly distant. One day, Blake receives an official death certificate for Grady, who had been missing for years, along with the keys to his childhood home in the mountains. The following day, he shows up at Charlotte's office and urges her to accompany him to his father's house, hoping a trip there will help mend their fractured relationship. Though hesitant, Charlotte ultimately agrees, seeing it as an opportunity to reconnect with both Blake and their daughter. The family sets off for Central Oregon, hoping to reconnect and spend quality time together. As they drive through isolated, winding roads surrounded by dense forests, they begin to lose their sense of direction and realize there is no phone signal. While trying to find their way, they come across a local named Derek, who immediately recognizes Blake after hearing his father's name. Offering to help, Derek guides them toward the house as the sun starts to dip below the horizon. Along the way, Blake introduces his family, but Derek's demeanor turns cold. Sensing the tension between them, he quickly picks up on the strained dynamics within the family. Just before they reach their destination, a humanoid creature suddenly emerges in the middle of the road. Startled, Blake swerves, causing the truck to veer off the path and crash down a slope. Moments later, the family regains consciousness, shaken but miraculously unharmed. However, the truck is precariously suspended, tilting dangerously. In a desperate attempt to escape, Derek loses his footing and tumbles out of the vehicle. Charlotte and Ginger quickly climb to safety, while Blake, still inside, catches a horrifying sight, the creature pouncing on Derek, tearing into him with terrifying ferocity. Paralyzed by fear, Blake scrambles to get out, but the creature suddenly lunges at him, slashing his arm before dragging Derek's lifeless body away into the darkness. As silence settles, Blake manages to climb out of the wreck, and hurriedly leads his family toward the house. Just as they near the entrance, the creature reappears, charging after them. They barely make it inside in time, slamming the door shut behind them. Inside, Blake grabs a flashlight, turns on the generator, and assures his family they'll be safe if they stay hidden until morning. Charlotte, however, grows increasingly anxious, trying to comprehend what kind of monster attacked them. Meanwhile, Blake cautiously surveys the surroundings. Though the immediate danger seems to have passed, he barricades the entrance, determined to protect his family from whatever is lurking outside. After some time, Blake attempts to establish communication using an old short-distance radio, and Charlotte rummages through Grady's belongings, uncovering a set of old keys. As Blake continues his search, he is drawn to a strange, pungent smell coming from a locked room, and discovers that his father had been storing preserved meat inside. Hungry and desperate, he takes a bite of one of the chunks, only to be struck by a sudden, sharp pain. To his shock, he spits out a tooth. Hearing his pained reaction, Charlotte rushes over with a medical kit. While tending to him, she notices the deep wound on his arm. Upon closer inspection, it's clear that the injury is far more severe than a simple glass cut. The realization leaves them both shaken, something far more sinister is at play. With his arm bloody and infected, Blake's condition rapidly worsens, his teeth begin falling out, sweat drenches his body, and every sound feels unbearably loud. As he struggles with his growing discomfort, a sudden clattering noise draws his attention. Gripping a hammer, he silently moves upstairs to investigate. To his surprise, he finds a spider skittering across the wall. But before he can fully process the moment, an intense, crippling pain seizes his body. His muscles tighten, his breath becomes ragged, and dizziness overtakes him. Regaining focus, he hears a faint thumping downstairs, and spots the monstrous creature lurking outside. As he presses his ear against the door, he hears its deep, guttural sniffing, sensing, searching. Before he can react, a powerful clawed hand bursts through the pet door, grabbing his foot and tearing into his flesh. Blake struggling to break free before Charlotte rushes in, slamming the hammer down on its arm, forcing it to retreat. After the incident, Blake wakes to a distorted voice echoing from the basement. Dizzy and disoriented, he follows the sound, and finds Charlotte using the radio to call for help. As he approaches, his vision blurs, and he can barely comprehend her words. Charlotte grows increasingly worried as Blake loses coordination, his human senses, and his ability to speak. Soon, Blake begins shedding hair, while a desperate Charlotte hands him a pen, urging him to describe his symptoms. With trembling hands, he scrawls a few barely legible words, marking his condition as critical. Seeing his rapid decline, an emotional Charlotte reassures him that they'll get medical help, but he no longer seems to understand her. Seeing blood dripping from his arm, she checks his wound and is horrified. It looks unnatural, spreading at an alarming rate. Suddenly, Blake recoils and, in agony, starts gnawing at his own infected arm, losing more teeth in the process. Terrified, Charlotte steps back and, while gathering herself, spots an old truck outside. Clutching onto hope, she rushes to the basement, grabs the keys and a battery, and quietly signals the family to leave. Under the cover of night, they sneak out. Charlotte hurriedly works to jumpstart the truck while Blake, his senses now eerily heightened, remains on guard. After several attempts, the engine roars to life, but before they can escape, the creature suddenly appears in front of the truck, shattering the windshield and attacking Charlotte. With no other choice, they abandon the truck and flee, seeking refuge atop a greenhouse as the monster snarls and growls while closing in on them. The roof strained under their weight as the monster relentlessly slashed at it, ripping through the structure. Ginger suddenly slips through the opening, but they manage to pull her back. Realizing they're trapped, Blake signals Charlotte to take Ginger back to the house while he sprints in the opposite direction, luring the creature away. Moments later, a heavily deformed Blake returns to his family, and limps into the house. Ginger cautiously approaches her father, now almost unrecognizable, his hair nearly gone, patches of fur covering his body, and sharp fangs protruding from his mouth. But he can no longer understand her. Suddenly, he begins grunting in pain as his nails fall off, replaced by growing claws. He vomits a severed finger and, in a moment of terrifying transformation, menacingly steps toward Charlotte, only to stop himself at the last moment, leaving both her and Ginger in fear. Realizing the danger he poses to them, Blake prepares to leave, but before he can, the creature breaks in and attacks. A violent struggle erupts as the beast overpowers Blake, slashing him with its claws and leaving him unconscious. As the creature drags him away, Charlotte, summoning her courage, strikes the beast, momentarily distracting it. Seizing the opportunity, Blake lunges at the creature, and sinks his teeth into its neck, killing it. As the creature lies lifeless on the floor, Blake recognizes a tattoo on its arm. The monster is his infected father. The horrifying realization sinks in just as his transformation accelerates. Stumbling outside, his body convulses in the final stages of the change. His chest heaves, bones crack and shift beneath his skin, fingers elongate, and his nails blacken into razor-sharp claws. With an agonizing snap, he forcibly pops his jaws outward. His breath turns guttural as the beast within struggles to emerge. As the last remnants of his humanity flicker, hunger and primal instinct fully take over. Inside the house, Charlotte and Ginger are plunged into darkness as the power suddenly cuts off. Clutching a knife, Charlotte braces for an impending threat, following the eerie sounds of thumping and snarling. Before she can react, Blake, now fully transformed, emerges beside Ginger, his monstrous form towering over her. Unable to control himself, he attacks his family. Charlotte, fueled by terror, shields Ginger and slashes at him with the knife. Realizing they stand no chance, she grabs Ginger and flees, sprinting toward a nearby barn. Once inside, she secures the entrance with a wooden log, their fate now hanging in the balance. Inside, Charlotte locates a torch and chains as Blake violently tears at the door, digging and crushing his way through. Using his heightened night vision, he silently sneaks toward them in the dark, only to be caught in a bear trap Charlotte had set. Enraged, Blake thrashes wildly, his fury intensifying. Charlotte and Ginger manage to flee just in time, as Blake struggles with his one leg caught in the trap. With overwhelming strength, he breaks free by chewing off his own foot, and resumes his pursuit. Charlotte and Ginger flee into the dense forest, but Blake, guided by his enhanced senses, tracks them with ease. Amid their escape, Charlotte stumbles upon Derek's severed arm, the site of his gruesome death. Remembering Derek had a gun, she frantically searches the area and finds it nearby. Just as she grips the weapon, Blake appears atop the wrecked truck, snarling. Clutching Ginger's hand, Charlotte rushes toward a hunting blind, taking refuge as the first light of dawn creeps in. Trembling in fear, they listen as Blake, growling and panting, claws his way up the structure. As he reaches the top, Charlotte raises the rifle, shielding her daughter. But when their eyes meet, she sees something beyond the monster. Blake is in agony, silently begging for release. In an unspoken farewell, they share one last moment. Then, with a guttural snarl, Blake lunges. Charlotte pulls the trigger. The bullet strikes him fatally. As Blake lies dying, his monstrous form fading, Charlotte and Ginger approaches him, offering comfort in his final moments. With his last breath, he finds peace. As mother and daughter step out of the forest, they pause at the edge of a valley, one Blake once described from his childhood, taking in its haunting beauty before walking away.